When we put young people in these situations, we're actually giving them the experience of the real trauma.
What they were saying is, let's traumatize these kids and let's have them experience it so I can get it on film.
Children who may actually be coming out of domestic violence or drug abuse being thrown into films and performing that content, and no one actually aware of.
Moments where actually we need to take space and actually, you know, call a cut, or say that this isn't appropriate, or say that actually we're not going to do this.
We can teach kids to act and do that really well.
And then just to say how this response, and also the response that we've been having in general, every time we talk about this concept, I think has made it so clear what a need there is in the industry to protect children. And I think that's something that everybody feels. I don't think there's anybody that's been watching TV or watching films or series or whatever and doesn't come across a scene where they see a child and they think, oh my God, how did they film it? And how did they protect the child? And I think that's precisely the need that we've tried to address with the role of the YPS. So essentially what we're trying to do, and what we have been trying to do, is to say, you know, as a society, as a world, we care about children, we care about children's rights. There's the world, there's the UN, everybody has charters on children's rights. And one of those rights is the right not to work. But in the film and TV industry, we need children to work because we need them to be able to tell our stories. And so historically, we've really tried to protect them in the best ways we know how, because they are working, and work shouldn't be what children do. And it's historically, the way we've tried to protect them is we've tried to make sure that their working hours are limited, that they continue with their education, that there's a chaperone with them on the sets. The problem is that a lot of that doesn't really address what's happening to the child in scenes where the young people are having to deal with traumatic content, or content that's potentially triggering to them. Because the way that the difference between young people and full-grown adults in the way they process what's happening to them on a set is very different. Adults can understand that they're performing, but with young people, when you put in a scene of your father's being killed and you have to catch him in your arms, and you're on a set and everything looks real and everybody's acting as if it's real and the blood looks real, and your father's act, or the person that you've come to like experience as your father, is lying in your arms, that goes not into the part of your brain that you understand is an acting experience. It goes into the part of your brain that is a real trauma. So when we put young people in these situations, we're actually giving them the experience of the real trauma. And that's why we're here today, to try and propose some solutions for how we actually can protect young people and how we can change that so that we take the experience of them being on set and acting in these contexts and put it in the part of their brain that they associate with play. So we're putting it in the part of their brain where they play with their friends and someone goes bang, bang, and everyone dies and everyone laughs and everyone gets up. That part of their brain is the part of their brain we're trying to put the experience of these scenes into. So I've got a beautiful panel. My name, just to introduce myself, is Sarah Blecher. I'm a filmmaker, a producer, and I'm co-founder together with my partner, Kate Lush, who beautifully welcomed you all into the room, of Safe Sets. We're an intimacy coordination company that's based in the UK and based in South Africa. We have been behind this whole move within South Africa, where we've really introduced the YPS concept onto many sets. And our partners in crime in this is, first of all, Dr. Emil Haarhoff. Emil, do you want to just say hi, and then I'll introduce you properly so everybody can see who I'm talking about?
Hello, everybody. Good to be here.
So Dr. Harhoff is an actor, a director, a choreographer, and an intimacy coordinator. He holds a PhD in drama, focusing on bridging actor-character dissonance through diffusing body-minded discomforts. Essentially, he's an expert on trauma, to put that shortly and simply. He also holds an MTech in musical theatre, focusing on skill-based versus child-centered dramatic arts teaching for grade 10 to 12 learners. And he's been directing and choreographing young performers for the last 15 years. He's one of the designers of the YPS role and course, and he's definitely one of the most experienced intimacy coordinators working in South Africa. Tam, do you want to say hi as well?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
So Tam Spears is an actress, a studio casting director, and the very first YPS, as far as we know, anywhere in the world. She's recently published a book titled A Filmmaker's Guide to Directing Children on Screen, which speaks very much of her experience working in this field, among other things. I mean, she's been working with children on screen very widely for a long time. She's one of the leading child and young performance coaches in South Africa and has been working as a senior lecturer at ACT Cape Town for the last 20 years. She's obviously, as the first YPS practicing, definitely instrumental in the founding of the role and our training course for YPSs. And then my partner, Kate.
Hello.
So Kate Lush is the co-director of Safe Set. She's an intimacy coordinator, movement director, movement teacher, and an actor. Kate specializes in training actors and non-actors in character development and storytelling from a physical rather than a psychological perspective. Skills she honed on set with the young performers and supporting artists on productions such as Raised by Wolves and The Witches spin-off and The Rats. Kate was living in South Africa. She recently relocated back to the UK, where she was instrumental in introducing the intimacy coordinator role into South Africa, and has been practicing in the UK. I'm not going to be the one doing most of the talking. I know I'm the one doing most of the talking now. But I just wanted to give you a sense of who all the people are here and what their backgrounds are. And then I'd really like to jump straight in, Emil, with you. If you can just explain to us and talk us through what really, in your opinion and in your experience, what was the need that led you to the YPS concept?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the beautiful introductions as well. Good afternoon, everybody. So I work as an intimacy coordinator in South Africa, and one of the first things that happens when a production contacts us is they send their scripts, and then we do breakdowns of these scripts. So essentially we go through them, we read them, and we do a breakdown on what are the vulnerable content, what are the emotional content, what are the, content that has the capacity to wound someone. And I want to go straight into a case study, a bigger budget Netflix production called Savage Beauty that I was working on early in the process of intimacy coordination in South Africa. And while breaking down the script, some scenes that came that came to light was, for example, children being burnt alive in this production, children being burnt by metal rods to brand them, or children being given put cream on their faces to bleach them lighter. So this was quite traumatic content. If we read this and the description is children are being burnt alive or branded or burnt by moisturizer we put on their skin, that is definitely something that I was flagging. And in flagging this, one of the big questions to production was, we're shooting this, it is traumatic content, it has the capacity to wound these young performers. Who is looking after them? And the response from production was, well, you're the IC, you're the one that handles vulnerable content, so you're bringing it to light, you're the one to look after them.
So, I mean, as an IC, how did you navigate this problem?
To be honest, sorry, my IC training did not prep me for that. So ICs are not trained to necessarily work with young performers in this capacity. And IC is, I'm a consent advocate. I'm someone that is coordinating cross-departmentally. I maintain intimate content. I design and choreograph the intimate content, and then I hold space for traumatic content when it's necessary to do so. But what I was asked to do was far beyond that. And looking at the YPS role now, being able to have broken it down into a methodology, I was expected to specialize in what these young performers are doing, to design their performance through play, which is not something that I was taught at an IC. To be able to reimagine stories or reimagine how we approach content in a way that is not going to scar these young performers, or is going to be able to lead them towards performance. Understanding the emotional regulation of a child is different from that as an adult. And then also the developmental phases. It's not just different, it's different in different stages of their development. But I used my experience as an IC, my training as an IC, and luckily I had a lot of experience directing young performers. I had, my master's was focusing, as you mentioned above, or before, it was specifically focused on skill-based versus child-centered training for young performers in dramatic arts, and a lot of previous knowledge with trauma. So I kind of used all of these little avenues that I've been exploring in my career to try and then solve this issue that I was presented with, and integrating that into my experience as an IC. So something I would do, for example, is the child that was afraid of the cream. The first step would be to take that child to the cream, or bring the cream to the child and going, hey, feel this. And she was so scared. Her little body was just cramping up and moving away from it, because she was told that this cream will burn her. And it won't. It's really just aqueous cream. It's really just moisturizer. So having to let her feel it, and as she feels and puts it on her skin, realizing that it doesn't burn us. Or, allowing the children to touch the piece of metal rod that will be burning them, that's painted red in the front, having them feel it and realize that this is not something that is going to hurt them. But in the same breath, then having to design their performance in a way that when they do touch that piece of metal, they can respond to it. So not just diffusing what the anxiety is or what they are scared of, but then being able to give them strategies to actually respond to this. And I remember very well, one of the directors told me on this, please stop doing that, because if you diffuse the anxiety too much, I'm not going to get an authentic response. And what they were saying is, let's traumatize these kids and let's have them experience it, so I can get it on film. And what this role is doing, or what we were doing, the methodology that I was trying to start and develop here was going, we can teach kids to act and do that really well. And that started to become what we now call performance architecture. And yes, so that is very different from an IC, right? That is very different from someone that is a movement designer for intimate content that has the capacity to hold space, versus someone working in a completely new methodology.
Absolutely. And I imagine so much is different between the role of an IC and the role of a YPS, because, simple things like consent become completely different. You're not just dealing with the consent of an adult, you're dealing with the consent of a guardian, you're dealing with the consent of a young person. Maybe can you just talk a little bit about that, about like how consent differs? When you're working as an IC, you're getting consent from the performer. When you're working with a young person, who do you need to get consent from?
Yes, so consent with minors is very complex, because when we're reading consent with adults, there's various layers. I listen to what you're saying, but I also listen and look at how your body's responding. That I'll also do with a minor or young performer. But we have 3 layers of consent that we work through. So firstly is my consent, the YPS's consent. So the consent in my breakdown going, do I think that this is content that could be shot, should be shot, could be handled by a minor? And if we think that it can't, how can we find creative solutions? Then the second layer of consent would be working with the parents specifically to make sure that they actually consent to this content. And then thirdly, working with the young performer and making sure that they understand what the work is that we're approaching, and do they actually consent to working with this specific content. And it's important to do all 3 layers. And for us in the current methodology, if one of these 3 is a no, that's a no. So
so you're really protecting the young performer, which is, I mean, you're giving extra layers of protection to that young performer, which is necessary. I mean, you know, they shouldn't be working in the first place, actually. So
and if I'm unsure, you know, then we get assessments done from the outside and make double sure. So when there's questions on my personal consent or the YPS's consent, and you know, then we double onto how do we then efficiently make sure that yes is a real and honest and informed yes that we can actually work with.
Amazing. Can I ask you, Emma, if you had to sort of list, I mean, I know this is a very big, huge question, and I'm sure it's part of the training, but if you had to list the fundamentals of the YPS methodology, could you just sort of talk us through basically what are the big areas that feed into this methodology?
Yeah, sure. So I met Tam on set for a film called Snake, and I was the IC on this project, but also because I've been developing protocols and methodologies for working with young performers at that stage, I was bringing that into the space as well. And Tamron was the acting coach working specifically with our young performer. And we then collaborated on that specific set, and it worked so well that we then started to together start developing this methodology of what our YPS specifically is. And there are 4 specific fundamentals that kind of form the basis of our work. Firstly is that we approach all work with purposeful play. So what purposeful play means is we take the primordial play sense of a child, that ingrained looking for pleasure, looking for play, looking for fiction, looking to move and to create. We use that as the basis of all our work, to then create performance and safety through familiarity and through familial events in play. Secondly is reality versus fiction. So the question is, how do consequences look different when we're in reality, which is this world that we're in currently, versus the play space or our story world or the world that we are filming in? And what are the steps to get from our reality into our fiction, and how do we operate differently in both to make sure that there's a clear division there? And then thirdly is taming the dragon, which is taking anxieties and subjective anxieties, right? Because every single minor is different. Taking those subjective anxieties and the things they're scared of and the fears, and kind of dismantling that. So it's called the dragon. We're saying that we want to make friends with the thing that we deem the dragon, essentially. And then performance architecture, which is creatively designing the performances, telling our vulnerable stories in developmentally safe ways. And then that is underscored with consent, as you just asked. That's underscored with de-rolling, stepping in, stepping out processes. What does our communication context, etc., look like, which we then borrow also from our IC training.
And before I move on to Tam, can I just ask you, in your experience, watching how this actually works practically on set, can you just maybe even think of an example or just give us a sense of how effective you're feeling that this methodology is being on set where you're working with it?
Right. Yes, I can actually speak about something that literally happened last week. Is Tam and I are currently working with a beautiful young deaf performer, and she is, oh man, she's beautiful in the way that she's approaching the work. We had a session with her in day one where we created a play space for her, a space where she goes into a rocket ship, and when she lands in the play space, that is a no consequence space where we design our actions. And she has a little zip up that she does when she goes into character, and zip down when she gets out. But we were filming a scene. It was her first solo scene. Camera was kind of in her face, and she just shut down. She did not know how to handle the camera being in her face, being alone, and then having to kind of operate in this play space, but as a solo performer. That was very, very scary. One of the big things was this camera is like a machine, and the machine is scaring me. And the set, that wasn't necessarily one of the scenes we flagged on the day. Interesting, we were not there for that scene, but production died. The efficiency of the set died. Director looked at her. She looked at the director. The ADs didn't know what to do. Everyone just went silent, and we went straight into our methodology. We started playing. We diffused the dragon. We played with the camera, see how it moves, what it does, how does it look when we're in front of it, how does it look when we're not in front of it. We stepped out into a world that is not necessarily our reality, and we started to play a scene that was adjacent to the scene that we're currently shooting, but could feed into. So we were creating this world and this play and this scenario where she was handling camera, moving from camera, walking through, bam, and then into her place without even thinking about it, and moving to a window. That is just a small moment of performance architecture, using all the methodologies that I just spoke about, in a scene that was not even vulnerable. Was for her.
Amazing.
But the question is, when we move to content that is honestly incredibly scary, how much more is this in play?
No, I mean, because the production could have thought, oh my God, we've cast the wrong person. This thing is never going to work. And on day one, it gets diffused and allows the young person to flourish, and allows her to do what she was supposed to be doing and the reason why she was cast. That's a beautiful example, because I think that is exactly an answer to so much of why this role exists. Tam, if I can move on to you now, if you can just talk us through why can't we just ask a young performer to just pretend? Can you talk us through what would, because many directors are like, well, let's just get them to pretend and it'll go into the right parts of their brain. But obviously this hasn't been working. So can you just explain why?
Thank you, and so lovely to meet everyone. If I may, just to give you a little bit of a book note to end to Emil's story, is that we, from that day, we went to Mossel Bay to shoot, and we had a tracking shot. And so, again, I decided to take a little rehearsal with playing the tracking shot, where I was the camera, ahead of the shoot day. And we got this incredible shot through a very scary sort of dilapidated building site with her. And the third day she said to me, I've got it, I know what to do now. And I think that's also what's really important, is the YPS, a little bit different, is our aim is to sometimes be able to retreat. So it's really about I think we're very sensitive. We're also filmmakers, so we're very sensitive to the timing of set. I think a lot of people think that our intervention might slow down production, or in fact might impede like creativity. And in fact, it's completely the opposite. I mean, I love directors, I'm an actor. And so really it's expediting those delays. It's helping performance to make beautiful, authentic performances. So when you say, well, can't a child just pretend? I have had the privilege of directing children and young people for 27 years. I've been a studio director for Chaos many years, and Zest, I think they're online. And I know that children can produce beautiful performances given the right time. But they are not trained. And they have very different developmental stages, and they require very different things. I was fortunate when I did my dissertation thesis for my teaching to take the same sets of lesson plans in drama, but adjust them to the different cognitive, social, emotional levels of ages, and realizing at that early time in my life that I needed to have a different approach for different ways of play, for different understanding. And so my approach to directing a 5-year-old is very different from directing a 19-year-old. And I say 19 because our young performers, our vulnerable performers, are still in their early 20s, and they need that support. And so if I can give you an example of just making a child pretend, I'd like to use a very lovely case study that I did recently for a wonderful South African series. It was a 5-year-old boy who, I'll paint the picture of the scene first, and I want you to think, had we shot it this way, what he would have been exposed to. The scene is he wakes up alone in a dilapidated dark building at night, screaming for his mother. He climbs out the car. He walks through a very, very scary building site, looking, and we needed great continuity for this because we were going to track his reverse and various different angles of him, looking for his mother. He arrives at a newly dug grave to find his mother with a plastic bag suffocating and the father leering over. And what we needed was this domestic violence case story, is we needed the fear of the boy. And I meet with parents before this, so I meet with production, we flag, we put some ideas in place. And I said to the parent, do you want consent for story or consent for action? And in our protocols, what that means is, do you want us to tell your child exactly what's happening? So maybe a 16-year-old, the parent might say, yes, I do want them to know, I don't want to lie. And we say, great, these are our strategies if we're going to do it this way. But for a 5-year-old boy, I was very, very clear at the parent. I said, I don't think we need to introduce him to the idea of domestic violence. This doesn't exist in your home. He's not developmentally ready to understand this. And this could create lifetime trauma for him. We don't want him to create any fear or any worry. We don't want any nightmares, and this is not the way we're going to shoot it. Now, some people might say, well, then why don't you just shoot the child out? But we've still got to shoot the story with the child. One might say, why did you have the child in the story? That's another conversation. The point is the parents are happy with telling the story. They are actors. They see the merit of the story, and they're aware that they are making the decision and the consent for this young child to be in the story. So I go, great. I think we should create a parallel. I can get the same kind of reactions for the director. And my story went like this. Eva, who is a wonderful director, played along, and we dressed up with the binoculars as avontuur in Afrikaans, adventurers. And we set up on I found out that our young boy loved dinosaurs. So I set up on this adventure. He would wake up in this dinosaur area, and we had spent the day putting dinosaur eggs in the space, so we disarmed the fear of the space with him, and we played in the space in a very safe way before it was dark. I was in the car with him, and I said to him, all right, we're going to play the game. He suited up. It's a stepping in process I have for children into the game space, or we load up our game. We've got different things for different ages. And he got out, and he had actually planted I'd given him dinosaur eggs, little dinosaurs, in all the places that we needed him to look. And the game was to go to those same places each time. So the continuity was brilliant. And as he was moving through it, we had a dinosaur egg in the bag that we needed him to open. And he was rescuing a dinosaur egg. And there was a massive brontosaurus. So when we wanted that, like him looking up to be scared of this father, he was actually responding to what he thought was this massive dinosaur. It was brilliant. Eva, the director, was so happy. We got to do 4 takes from 4 different setups of camera, and he was just loving it. He wanted to go again. His performances were phenomenal. I mean, he was just so into this game, and you know, he wanted to show the scariness of and the fact that he was rescuing. And the story would have ended there brilliantly. But one thing happened that was unfortunate. They didn't tell me that they wanted to do a wild take of him screaming his mother's name. And I had gone to talk to mom, because I work very closely with mom and chaperones and childminders. We work as a team. And I had just gone to kind of like de-roll what had happened. And the sound guy just grabbed him, and the director actually wasn't there, and said, "Your mother has left set." And what he wanted to do was make this child scared, so he screamed for his mother. The irony is that he didn't get his take. He did actually traumatize my young actor, but my young actor did what children do. He made a frog voice, and he went, "Nah, nah," because he was so uncomfortable. So we didn't get the wild take. It actually distressed him. And this is unfortunately what happens, is that everyone has well-meaning, but I know when crews are stressed and time is limited, sometimes we just don't want to play the pretend game, and we can inadvertently and obviously not even unawarely affect trauma. So it's really important that we understand that we can't just make a child pretend in the moment. There's a development. We have to set it up, and we have to set it down. It's a build up. And someone might say to me, "Well, Tam, you're an acting coach. Doesn't an acting coach do that?" And I say this, it does. Acting coaches can do this. But the difference here in the YPS intersection and safeguarding is my access into the world and working alongside the director. As an acting coach, I'm often offset in a trailer. I can't actually see what's happening on the day. There are people in the world, as I was working on my book, Alison Creswell was an amazing instrumental person in me understanding welfare producing in the UK, the idea that there are safeguarding. So we're not the new people, but it's interesting, we've created our own methodology around this. When I interviewed various people for the book, I interviewed Jim Nichol and Miranda Harcourt, Bree Peters. They were an Australian cohort working together on films like Lion, Sweet Tooth. They were doing these kinds of practices, but they have long-term relationships. I met with Lecary and Rhinina with Supermotor. I started to see that there are people who are saying, "Look, we do need to do something more. We're struggling." And I was like, I think people don't want to keep rewriting something at the beginning. Wouldn't it be great if we had a system, or we had individuals who could do this for the team, instead of just every one of us on our own realizing at the time of filming it isn't working, and then trying to find ways. So to say that there are a lot of people who are very, very much doing this work all over the world, and I interviewed a lot of them in the book. Sean Baker, Florida Project. There are fantastic stories, but in interviewing people, we were hearing some really, really like dangerous stories. Children who have had experience in war in their country, thrown into films where they're experiencing war with no real protection for what's happening in performance. Children who may actually be coming out of domestic violence or drug abuse, being thrown into films and performing that content, and no one actually aware of the fact that they've actually forgotten. Because as Emil was saying, yes, children live in paracosms and storytelling, but if they don't understand, if the brain doesn't switch into story mode, they actually embody this as real. I'll give you one example of it. So we in this film, in this series we're shooting at the moment, we have a funeral, and the lead person is going to die, who's our lead actor. And we told that I wasn't on set that day. We didn't think we needed me. The young girl was just going to walk into the funeral home for the shot. But what happened was the artist put a placard of the lead actress saying she died, and my young person thought the lead had died. The actual lead had died, and she broke down. So again, we're not always capable of seeing invisible things that could happen on set. And so YPSs are already looking for anything that could potentially cause distress. And so we're
can I ask you, Tam, just to jump in there? But so working as a YPS, I mean, there are obviously a lot of people on sets who are there to safeguard the young person. There's a chaperone, there's a child psychologist very often, they're the parents that are there. Can you sort of talk about how the YPS works together with this team, and how you see your role as the YPS within that team?
Absolutely. In fact, in one of the international productions, in 2 international productions I've worked on, I've worked actually very closely with this child psychologist. And the child psychologist also saw the benefit of having me there, because the child psychologist did the initial assessment. And because of my experience and studying, I also know play therapy. So we were able to, she could give me some very detailed information about where we should play and where are the limitations within play. And then I was able to report back to her, and she could do check-ins. But sometimes a psychologist isn't a performance expert, so they don't really understand the set. They don't really know how to engage on a set, and they perhaps aren't engaged in the job to be on the day-to-day set. So to have me there, to know that I'm engaging in play, to give them report backs on my risk assessments, for them to see how thorough our risk assessments were. They were like, you're doing what we do. That's fantastic. You know, that's really, so they're very much in support of us. I work really closely with childminders and chaperones who see such a benefit for me being there, because they themselves have often felt that there are very often are silenced voices where they've gone, I think we're doing a great job, but who's checking in on this child? Something's happened on set, and I don't have the skill set to disarm what's happened, but something's not right here. So when they know I'm there, and it's such a lovely day, because the minute they're on set, they're with me, and then once they're off that working set, they're the childminder, and we spend the day together. So it's a pastoral approach to taking care, but we're very much clear in our lanes. So they're the well-being, the feeding, the making sure that they're entertained, the ability to have breaks, to have fun time, to have education. The set teachers have been instrumental in helping me, sometimes with dialogue, or I might say to them that this is a very emotionally taxing day, and they say, great, that's good for me to know, because we can do something different today. And then, of course, the guardian, and I say guardian because it's not always a parent. They are often left out, and they're not certain what's happening. So my job is also to make sure that they're well informed, and they know that we call it CADS, but I'm listening and I'm watching performance, and I'm watching in between takes, and I'm listening to conversations that might be happening on set. I was able to intersect something when I saw adult actors talking about suicide, and I knew that this young child was about to walk on set, so I was able to, you know, remove the young person, because that is, again, something that somebody else might miss.
Yeah,
So,
no, incredible. And
really,
go ahead.
No, so I just say it's really important to know that a lot of our consent also comes from parents, and Emil was talking about embodied consent. So children aren't always able to consent, because they have this belief that children who do well and are obedient, compliant, are talented. We've created sometimes a dangerous misconception that we say to a child, oh, you're so good, you did what I said, you're so good. And so they don't want to say no. And then you can see it. They'll be flighting, they'll want to leave set, they'll want to go to the bathroom, or they'll fawn, they'll overly try. And those are all concerning things that we want to be able to flag and say, look, this isn't going well. And so when parents hear that, that's what we're looking at. And we got no other responsibility on set. Our job is watching the well-being of that young person. And directors are like, fantastic, you know, because I just want to get going with it. And if you can translate that into like a 7-year-old, or if you can just, like, you know, as long as I can get that beautiful human being back on set for tomorrow, I'm really happy.
Yeah.
And can we work collaboratively together? And we're not there all the time. So it's really also great, because we're not asking children to become so reliant on us that they can't work with us. Mm-hmm. They know that we're only there on those days. So we're not taking that independence away from a young person in performing. Yeah. But even with my like 19 or 20-year-olds, like, they need to sometimes de-roll. They do a scene and they go so deep, and they're only new into this learning of sense and effective memories, and they're using real stuff, and they go deep, and then they say, oh, I don't know how to get out of this. And then they need a process. They need a process through drama and through play and through the separation of character from self to be able to separate.
Yeah. And
so they're also, I would
imagine. Yeah.
I think we think because they're 18 that, you know, that they're fine.
Yeah.
But I've got young actors, even in their second and third year of higher education, who are still learning how the to keep control with the instrument, because it is a control thing. Because once you start allowing emotion and imagination, and you start to live with your empathy, the feelings, you know, those hormones are released, oxytocin, all those, and you don't know how to control it.
Yeah.
And you need support.
Yeah, I mean, and I imagine that you would be available if the parents say this is a particular scene, we need support, or the director. Just working as a director myself, I mean, I know they say the worst thing that you ever have to work with on set is children and animals, and to have someone to help you with the children, and not to direct your film for you, obviously, but to help you allow the child to be safe. That you don't have to sit there worrying, oh my God, what am I doing to this young person? And also to know that you're going to be able to get that performance you need from the child. I mean, it's extremely, extremely exciting. I do want to leave some space for questions at the end, and I am mindful that we're running close to time. So Kate, can I turn to you? Because I think, you know, one of the things that we've found at Safe Sets is, as we've been doing this role, and as we've been introducing this role onto sets and seeing the success of this role, it's become really, really critical to have people trained in this role. Because it's all very well for young people to say, okay, great, this is a brilliant concept, love the concept, need a YPS. But where are trained people? Where are people who can actually do this job? So I know that you and Tam and Emil and myself have been working really hard on developing a training to start. I mean, it's a brand new field. It's a field that's opening. It's like where intimacy coordination was maybe 10 years ago. So it's not written, you know, it's not firm in stone. Anyone that's getting involved in this field is obviously taking it further, developing it in different ways based on the experiences that people are having on set. But I'd love it, Kate, if you could just talk to us a little bit about the training, what the training encompasses, what it involves. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, big question, but you're absolutely right. It's a brand new course, it's a brand new concept, so it's evolving. And so we have run one training, which was amazing in terms of the diversity of geographic locations that people came from. And so much then has been informed from the first training to the second training, which is pretty much what we did with the intimacy coordination training as well. Our first intimacy coordination training was in 2021. And we're able to take feedback from the participants. What worked, what didn't work, what do you need more of, what needs to be stretched, what can be condensed. And, you know, and then taking it onto set, working it, developing it, evolving it, what is working practically, what is not working practically, and keep growing and reshaping. So it is a new course, and we are going to run our second course it's going to kick off in sort of early September. And then this time it's going to be 10 weeks online, one day a week, 2 hours a session. And then it'll be followed by 5 days in-person training. So full-time in person, which will be in London. And that process is now in place. And we're actually currently taking applications, should anybody be curious about this role and applying to the course. The deadline was in fact yesterday, but what we've done is we've extended it for the, because of the webinar, just in case anyone is interested. So we've got another 2 weeks on that. So they're in everyone's email that you received with the link to this webinar. There's a link to the information on their website that says more about the training, and also the form that you would need to fill in to be an applicant. So that's all there for you in the email. But if you've got any questions at all, I think I've personally pretty much emailed you all, so do just ping any questions over to me, and I'm happy to just answer any queries you might have about that. Well, obviously with Safe Sets, one of our real ethoses is trying to give global access to people to receive training, which is really difficult because, of course, when it comes to the expense of these courses, the price point it sits very differently for different countries. So we always endeavour to try and find funding partners which we're actively doing for this course as well. We've got some applications out. We're always looking for new ideas. But we were super lucky on the first course. We had someone from Kenya who was able to join us on that course, which was amazing. And we have funding relationships there, but they did that on their own back, which was incredible. But we're always looking for those opportunities where we can have as many people around the world, because like the intimacy coordinator role, you can say that we should advocate for this role to be on set, but if there aren't people locally that can do it, then it's very difficult to fight for it. And I know that we certainly found that with Netflix in the first version of the IC training. They wanted to recommend that ICs were used, but there simply weren't intimacy coordinators in the regions that they were making the content. So, you know, long term, we would hope to do that. So yeah, do you have a question there? Sorry, I can feel an edge of a question there. I know you so well. Yes.
I think maybe if you could sort of talk a little bit through some of the content of the training. So you said it was 10 weeks on, you said it was 10 weeks online, then 5 weeks in person in London, and then a mentorship process at the end of that. But sort of what does the training look like? 2 hours online every week, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's split into modules. So we kind of have an onboarding module, then it is with our module 1, then we've got intro to the YPS, so the history of the role, how it functions. So sort of elaborating what Emil talked about earlier. We talk about the minor and the law and context, and that's really interesting because geographically speaking, that changes massively depending where you are. So actually, we really get the people to dig into their own regions, their own laws, what exists, what are the rules around chaperones, what are the rules around licensing, what are the rules around what you're allowed to show or not show, thinking about also the intersection of when it's kind of relevant for an intimacy coordinator to be there, as well as a YPS, because that might be different as well. And so just thinking about all of that would be our third module. Module 4, we're looking at child development, looking at the stepping stones, where they are at the different stages, the earlier years, what's appropriate content to be working with, appropriate language to be using, where the play methodology would sit, relative again to the age, but also that particular child. So thinking about the onboarding process and speaking to and understanding where that child is, because it's very different working with a child who's been on set their entire lives and they're only 12, but they've got 10 movies under their belt, versus a child who's 12 who's never even seen a film set before. So we're thinking about all of that in that fourth stage, and how we then also talk about the material and translate that material that really fits with those people. Module 5 is about the communication, the dynamics of communication in all the various spaces with the young person, but the families, with the set, with production, with the filmmakers that you're working with. Of course, then next module, power and consent, and the power, consent and power dynamics on set, which is a massive part of IC training as well. But how do we work within that structure? How do we slot into the world of it? And how do we also work out the moments where actually we need to take space and actually, you know, call a cut, or say that this isn't appropriate, or say that actually we're not going to do this because this is going to cause harm. Looking at number 7, we look then at the practicalities of working on set. So we call it like set 101. For some people who have on the training, they might come from a theatre background. So film and TV might be all the skills for working with young people, and they might be theatre directors or young youth theatre directors, and used to working with children, but they don't know the film industry, the structure of a day on set even. So we make sure that everyone knows how that functions, so they're not sort of surprised when they get to set. Then we move on to the pre-production workflow and the workflow during the production, to make sure that there's really clear stepping stones as to the role, what you do and when you do it, and what that relationship is with whom, at which stage, and how that then goes right the way through the production process. So making sure the paperwork is aligned, everything else, developing risk estimates, everything else. So that's all of the online stuff. And then by the time we get to the kind of, we've got homework, we do risk assessments, and we do all of our digging in, get in person, then we learn to play. How do we create a play? What are the alternative strategies? And then we're kind of like rolling around and creating different ways of working. We're sharing knowledge, because again, we've got lovely people we had on the first training, and it looks like we're having on the second, who've got a wealth of experience working with young people in different ways. And so actually sharing that knowledge and building the cohorts and building this community that actually can build support with each other, which is what we've done with the IC training as well. Really build these kind of community networks which feeds right the way through, and are going to push into that mentorship stage before I run out of time entirely. So moving into mentorship. to the end, to the mentorship, which is then long-term support for our learners, building in community, direct access to the trainers, but also sharing knowledge and then upskilling as well as we go through. And then we've got evaluation process in the end. I'm going to stop talking on that now, but I think that's probably giving you a vague picture.
Well, I think that a lot of this information is actually on the website. So if anyone is wanting to understand what the training includes, they can really go to our Safe Sets website and look up a lot of this information. I do want to open the floor to questions, because I realize there's a huge amount of information that Tam and Emil and Kate yourself have given. And I'm wondering if there are any questions that people who are here have about the role, about what could work, about what's working, or any questions that anyone's having in their own lives around these issues and around safeguarding and protecting children, or just stories that people want to tell about things that have happened. If you do you want to just put your hand up, and then we'll see that you do have questions. Kate, I can't actually see everybody, so I can't see the whole entire screen. So I'm wondering if anybody does have any questions, or if anybody just wants to talk about something that they've experienced working with minors on sets or with young people on sets in their own countries.
So hi, I'm Kaya from Poland. So
Hi, Kaya.
I am mother, so I don't want to work with kids anymore. But what I have them at home. But as I can see, you experience the same experience that I thought that we are kind of wild west, and but what I can hear, children around a world are not safe on set. And I have a funny anecdote maybe from yesterday, because I'm coordinating work. So American production comes to Poland and there's a child. So the law is different. In Poland, law is different. Parent is fully responsible for giving any kind of consent till the child is 13. And there are some rules and law, but generally some productions want another support. So the difficulty I had to explain to the production that head of dead cow, real dead cow, cannot be next to child, generally because of physical safety, not only emotional. So, but director wants it. Okay, I support imagination and so on. Why cannot we have that fake head cow? Oh, because it's too expensive. I was like, come on, guys. Even next day, child in a hospital with fever, and first imagination to mom will come that, oh, that cow was on set, and real blood, real blood, not a joke. So I said, hey guys, no way, and the difficulty what I have to understand, we have also some celebrities in Poland, and we have one of famous celebrity that doesn't at all work with dead animals because she's a vegetarian and she's very vulnerable, and so on. And the child, 6-year-old, surname was Ukrainian, as we know, we are around Ukraine. It's no way, I'm not going on set. I'm not supporting this. So if you're crazy, go for it, have a dead cow. I won't look at this. I won't support this kind of thing. And they found stuffed cow's head in Krakow. So next day it came. But so my experience is why they it was Wednesday when they said, oh, but it's in script it's supposed to be skull, and father in retrospection runs after his son and scares him and so on. So quite safe, I would say, generally possible without trauma to shoot. So only saying, I cannot imagine why people, they see that it's nothing, as we are talking about consent, because I'm afraid of that cow, because cannot give consent because never seen a dead cow probably in his life. So, and he's 6 years old and half Ukrainian. So I cannot imagine, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's, and one day before.
I mean, I think the thing that Emil says all the time, which is so true, we cannot let children be collateral damage for art. You know what I mean? We as adults have the responsibility to make sure that they are not the collateral damage.
They don't see the responsibility. They see it's okay. So only saying like real blood, but to adult actor, they wouldn't even put normal blood. Like the imagination, it's like, so it's like giving a knife or other things to, or a gun with the normal, like, I don't know, like, so my surprise is they don't see that they can do damage biologically and psychologically.
You see, I think
next,
Kaya, what we're really fighting for in South Africa at the moment is we're really trying to link the licensing of children to be able to work on sets with how are you protecting them. So we're saying with the question of, if you get a license, one of the questions in that license must be, is there any traumatic content for the child? And if there is, how are you protecting that child? So before you get a license, you need to have a strategy for protecting the young people who need that license. And I think that's something that we've learned over the years is the only way we can get productions to understand that we need to protect young people, you know, to link it. But I think that's something for a long conversation. And I'm so happy to see you here. And I hope this is going to be a conversation we're going to continue having, because I can't tell you what a difference it makes on the sets where there is a YPS.
Oh,
you know, where that
huge
person
difference.
is in,
It's huge difference when somebody is like just supporting the consent and child feels like not only safe but self in expressing and giving interpretation of the aura thing or something, because then they really are really creative in their feelings. So yeah, but and
it benefits the production. It benefits the production to have someone there helping, as opposed to a child stopping performing. You know, which is what Tam described in the example that she gave, where the child was on set and the child just shut down, and you can't carry on because you can't make a child feel safe if they're not safe. You know, so yeah, it's very interesting. I wonder if anybody else has a question. Kate, I saw there was a question in the chats.
There was, it was just about, that was about when we were opening applications again for the next round. And I've just said to mail me and I'll get you on the mailing list. And then next time we open the next bookings that people can apply.
Yeah.
And I'm also just sort of aware of time. We're over by 2 minutes. So anybody who needs to bounce, no problems at all. I'll keep the recording going until the end. And I'll be sending the link out to everyone who signed up anyway, so you can always I'll put a note saying, oh, there was an interesting bit in the last 30 seconds, so do fast forward to there.
I think Monique has a question. Go ahead.
Not actually a question, just a big thank you to all of you for all the work that you're doing around this. It's so incredibly valuable, and yeah, just the level of detail, the level of thought that's gone into it. I mean, already the things that you have all spoken about have been really, really illuminating. And I'm coming in with, a couple of decades in the industry behind me, and I've always been interested in things like this. But I just want to commend you and say thank you very, very much.
There's a question in the chat as well. A couple of questions, actually. The first one, if a guardian parent is not available on set with the child, how does the set deal with this? This is country dependent, actually, because there's different rules in different countries. And in fact, some countries rely on the chaperone legally. The BBC, for example, in the UK, wants the child to be dropped off like you would at school and for the chaperone to take over the responsibility. In South Africa, it varies. And there should always be a designated childminder they have in South Africa who should take care of the child. But it depends on the production. It depends on the scale of the production. Somebody needs to be with that child, and that is a conversation that needs to happen in productions. But certainly when I was working in South Africa, it was in cases where it was just the childminder and no associated adult. And sometimes it was just the associated adult and no childminder. So it really will depend on the production, on the scale of the production and the geographic location of the production, what those rules are. And there was another one. Is there a screening process for the applicants? Does one have to have an acting or production background? Yes, there is a screening process. There's a big application form. We are looking for people who have experience working with minors, who have gotten experience in either acting, coaching, directing, choreography, those roles, but also sometimes we have people with the intersection of people who are drama therapists and have worked with that, and then intimacy coordinators as well. Sometimes intimacy coordinators might come from none of those backgrounds but have found themselves being asked to support minors, and we have taken those to upskill them because they're doing the work already, and it's better to take them and give them some training in this space and give them the skills, or to know when, as an IC, that they can pivot and they can recommend a YPS as well. So that was there, and there's another hand that's gone up. Yes, Sarah.
Yeah, no, I think I was just going to point to the hand. MKJ, if you've got a question.
Yes, good morning.
Afternoon, I think by now.
Yes, afternoon. Yes, afternoon. I think for me, I don't know, like, do you want to see me or I must just continue?
It would be lovely to see you, but you can also just continue if you like.
Okay, let me continue. Okay, maybe just to pop in. Hey, yeah, somewhere in the world. I think my thing, it's like I'm interested in the program. But I think just to say my experience with children, and then I think around the Joburg section, mostly when you facilitate drama classes, you deal with a lot of children who are from houses, or maybe let me say that I've experienced and in real time that some children, they're from abused backgrounds. And so by the time because also drama in its nature is a contact sport, it's a contact thing. So we find ourselves in a space where we must negotiate, even if you are comfortable in touching, but you must negotiate the touching with the student because you don't want to trigger. And yes, so I think I'm happy that there are programs like this that will help at least some of us who are also not only actors but facilitators and people working with children. That how do we also in schools, in community theaters, how do we negotiate the space of touch? How do we negotiate emotions if there's something like that? But how do you, as a facilitator, how do you constantly negotiate the space with the participant, especially children, because children are vulnerable? And then which subjects, how do we introduce things like maybe, let's say, teenage pregnancy or sex conversations, but without really saying sex, but finding tools how to play? And I'm just drawing from applied drama and theater as it's my place of study, and I'm part-timely doing it, but mostly I'm facilitating drama classes. Yes, and I'm interested in the workshop or in the course itself.
Yeah, I mean, you've raised so many questions, and obviously dealing with vulnerable children or children that have experienced so many things beyond what is appropriate for their age. You know, it's as you rightly point out, it's incredibly complicated and needs huge amount of care, because you don't want to be re-traumatizing the children, but you also want to be giving them a space to be able to express what they're wanting to express. And it's hats off to you for recognizing how difficult it is, because it is incredibly difficult and potentially incredibly damaging as well. You know, if you don't do it carefully and properly, and if you don't deal with the young people with the care that they need, especially when they're more vulnerable. Absolutely. You know, in working as a YPS, you're dealing with one child. You're not dealing with multiple, I mean, not necessarily one child, but you have the care of one young performer or two young performers. It's not a whole class that you're having to engage with. And obviously, I mean, I think Tam can speak to this much more than me, but the more information you have about what the child or the young person has experienced, the more you're able to protect them. So before you start working as a YPS, you really try and get as much information as you can, or a sense of where the trigger areas will be, so that you don't re-go there in a way that makes the child vulnerable. Tam, do you want to maybe have a go at
I
this?
want to say, so at YPS, sorry, sometimes we do work with multiple children. I've worked on productions with groups of children. You know, there was a scene where actually the background artists of the day needed my support. It was the scene with dolls, and they were made to look like people impaled and deadly. And again, this is what adults see. They see a beautiful set with smoke machines and, you know, dolls lying around impaled with fake blood. But to children, that can be an incredibly frightening environment. And so just before these background artists arrived, I was immediately able to say, wait, like, we need to have a game, or we need to put the lights on, show them the dolls. I found out that one of the children actually believed that dolls had feelings, so we needed to go and do a doll workshop. They could see how the dolls were made. What MKJ is saying is very important. With teens, you are dealing with young people who do know these situations and experience them. So again, it's not about necessarily creating a parallel, but it is about being able to engage with them on the topic, to talk about it, to reframe it, to cognitively reframe it. So how would the story end if it was to end well? So in this story, this domestic violence, the family dies and the bludgeoned. How can we reframe it? And so these conversations are just some of the strategies that we have in place. Again, we do consent workshops with teens, like, you know, and it's amazing for them, because they think that that's going to make them feel more uncomfortable. But in fact, at the end, they say, oh, I thought by talking about it or us doing it, it would be more weird. But actually, I feel like so much more safe to touch and be touched, because I feel like we've navigated in a play space. Look, this is a very detailed conversation we don't have a lot of time for, but MKJ, the most important thing is setting up the play space, the place of non-consequence, and having candid, honest conversations, creating space for young people to be collaborators, to have a voice, to speak, to air their fears, to allay their fears by the story, or to ask them why do we do stories? What is the purpose of telling stories? And maybe they understand that the purpose of telling the story is so that we can look at life and maybe make different decisions, or that we can see something happening before, you know, when they see the purpose. I mean, my students loved adolescence, because they thought this was so great that like a young person's at the forefront of a story. They want to be in the front. They want to be part of the world. They don't want to be just a background kid, like in, you know, in summer holiday, where they want to tell their stories. But they need support in doing so. And I think what MKJ is doing is brilliant, creating those spaces of drama.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I am mindful that we're quite over time. I think let's take one more question. I think let's take one more question. But I think what's clear is that this conversation needs to continue. It's not a conversation that we can just, you know, have so quickly. I think that there's a lot of information that's been thrown out, and I am hoping that everyone's going to take this on board and that this conversation can continue. Please, I see Kate's put the SafeSet email address in the chat. Please feel free to reach out. We really, really, really would love to continue the conversation. And we'd love to continue engaging, because I think this is the beginning of a movement that we want to grow around the world. Ria, I think you're going to be the last question, if you want to go ahead.
Hi. Can you all hear me?
Long time, Ria.
So just taking from what you were saying before, I just want to understand how important is it for the director not only to be transparent and in conversation with the YPS, but also with the actor, the child actor. Like, at what length should the director be explaining the storyline and what they want out of the child, irrespective of me being there as their representative, so that they understand what they're supposed to do, and then I take it forward from there.
Go ahead, Tam. I think that's a question directly to
So
you.
very different directors have very different processes. Some directors want me to actually engage with the directors. The director can engage with the actor themselves and empower the director to do that, just to give them support. And other times the director is quite happy for us as YPSs to go in. So the director will almost tell me, like, this is what I'm looking for, you know, they come here and the young person's with me. But then while they've got a technical flaw, I've got that opportunity to go in that technical flaw. I'm not taking anyone's time up, and I'm going to quickly do my process. And because I've already I've started that process with that young person, I've got like a shorthand into how to work with them. So I can translate it. And sometimes the director will be with me and we'll do it together. I mean, just to give you a little insight, when I was working on Snake, which is actually the co-authorship book that I spoke about earlier, Meg Rickards, who was my director of Snake, and I worked on the book together, and we worked very collaboratively on Snake together. And it's been a beautiful growth organically into the YPS role. But no two directors have been the same for me. And so, like, no two children are the same, no two young people are the same. So it's really about understanding how we can work together and having those open, candid conversations. Yeah, because ultimately it's a director's vision, and we all want to really be there and show up for that, and be able to make their magic, which they're going to do. But we want to be able to support them in making sure they can get the most out of a young person, and that they don't need to fall into the traps of trickery. Or I'll never forget, and this is the first thing is when I saw a director give a child something and remove it and go film them crying, go for it. And I was like, that's not, no. I can't see this anymore. We don't need to fall to trickery. And young people are amazing. We need to actually respect that they are pretty incredible. And we just have to look at some of the greatest films of the time with young people who've been giving us really beautiful stories. But we don't need to use trickery or trauma as a quick way to get our take. If that answers your question.
I think that's a beautiful place to leave things, Tam. And I'm going to reiterate is that, you know, the whole mission here is we don't want young people to be the collateral damage for our art. I mean, I really think that there can't be a better line, but we do want to empower them to add to our art because we need them. So how do we do that while keeping them safe? So getting beautiful performances and keeping them safe. Yeah, I just want to really close up everything and thank everybody for being here and for being part of the conversation. And as I said, I'm just going to repeat myself one more time. Please feel free to reach out to us. This is something, obviously, the four of us are unbelievably passionate about growing and about developing around the world. And we'd love to speak to you if this is your mission as well. So yeah, please do reach out to us, and thank you very much.